Hello, thank you for the very warm introduction and also for the invitation, Minister, leaders of the industry, leaders of the association. It's a pleasure for me to be here. It's a pleasure for me to have the chance for conversation with you, to listen to the preceding speakers. Impressive insights so far. The title of my presentation is The New Global Chessboard, following the line of the entire event today, Risks and Opportunities for the European Industry. It's a fantastic title because everything fits in it. And I brought much, much more than I can actually speak to you in 15 minutes. So if there's anything that you would like to listen more about, or give me a comment or give feedback, then do please make sure to speak to me after the speeches at the event. And I hope the clicker works. Yes, there we go. So you know who I am. Thank you again for the warm introduction. I hope the QR code works. Maybe instead of introducing myself, I tell you a little bit about who and what Clepa represents. Clepa is the European Association of the Automotive Suppliers Industry, on European level in Brussels. Our members are 13 national associations, one of them Sernauto. We also have 120 direct corporate members, and we have been created 67 years ago, 1958, 1 year after the Treaty of Rome. The European Commission asked industry to come with a consolidated opinion on topics that are of high priority and where there is legislation to be discussed so that they don't have to do that themselves. And I can say we have been doing that now for 67 years. We have expanded greatly on the agenda that we are covering. And we are translating back, of course, what policymakers are doing towards the industry. So we are this link, the connection between those two worlds, between your daily reality in businesses, in running businesses, with living with the impact of legislation, and then also coming back with your priorities towards policymakers to explain what needs to be done, where we need support, where we need to do things a bit better. And competitiveness has been mentioned in each and every one of the speeches that we have heard today. And competitiveness is also the red thread about everything that I'm going to speak about today, where we are in Europe, where we need to do more on policy side, but also where there are chances for industry and where there are new opportunities for industry. On this first slide, these are numbers that most of you will know. It comes from S&P. It is the forecast of market development. There are two messages in that slide for me, simplifying quite bluntly. Volumes are globally almost back to where we were before the pandemic. In Europe, unfortunately, that's not on the slide, but you know that, in Europe they aren't. We are still missing millions of units of sales in Europe that we had seen before the pandemic that we have not recovered. The second transformation, the second trend in that slide is the development towards electrification. You see in this last bar in 2030 on the right side of the slide, we have an almost even split between conventional combustion engine vehicles being put newly on the market, hybridized vehicles, and then on the bottom, it's a bit hard to read probably, but trust me, this is the share of battery electric vehicles in the market. So that means the electrification is on its way. There is the transformation ongoing, but it's also ongoing not fast enough to have the volumes call off from your customers, from your clients for production of electric vehicles, and not fast enough to justify the investments that have been made by the entire industry in electrification, because we need a return on these investments. Otherwise, this is capital sitting around not doing anything. And in the worst case, in these fantastic new facilities that have been created, unfortunately, the lights are switched off because there's not enough demand. So this leads for industry to a situation, together with many other factors that impact our daily business, where unfortunately these red bars on the bottom of the slide have been larger than the green bars. This is your expectation for the next 12 months on average. We have polled in the last wave about 170 companies, more than ever before, across the European Union, from the automotive supply chain, with the question, what's your general outlook for the industry? And you see, the first time we did that in 2018, together with McKinsey, who are doing this survey for us twice a year, that was the last good year where we had the bar in green larger than the bar in red. We came close in a few years, but fundamentally it has been in crisis mode ever since. COVID, supply chain crisis, energy supply crisis, economic recession. This creates pressure on the industry that we need to deal with. And now, not really recently, but much faster and on a much higher magnitude of impact, we feel the competition from other markets. And if I say other markets, the dragon in the room, as you can see on the slide, is always China. So that slide is best read from the bottom right and then counterclockwise upwards. What incumbent markets and market share is lost, proportionally China is taking up. And that in a world where in Europe we still are missing sales volumes. Also, we see in China the uptake of electric mobility going up in that almost highest possible way that we expected to also see in the European market, but which, of course, in reality we don't see in Europe and in the Western markets. We heard a lot about the role of energy and the role of energy prices and electricity prices in the speech before. There's one observation: it makes a huge difference for the deployment of electricity and electric mobility if you charge your vehicle for 8 cents per kilowatt hour, or even less, I hear, in China, or if you pay, it's not on the slide, but everybody knows who has an electric vehicle, 80 cents, up to 80 cents per kilowatt hour along the highways. And the same problem is, of course, there for industrial production. Price of electricity is a key denominator of competitiveness. We are in Europe, we afford in Europe an electricity price which is much higher on average. And I know in Spain the situation looks better, but on average in Europe much, much higher than our competitors. Development cycles, I think I don't need to say anything about that, you know that. This is reflected again in our survey with McKinsey. The question, how much do you feel competition from Chinese suppliers in the market? You see that in the current business. There's a significant number who says already now, this is significant competition. We are feeling that, and you're seeing that going up significantly when we are looking towards the midterm in 2030. Where does this lead us to? We see that in the headlines, which we see now on the slide that you all know. There's significant pressure on the industry in Europe. That translates into job cuts. We have lost 100,000 jobs in the last 2 years, and that in an industry that directly employs 1.7 million people. We have lost 100,000 jobs in the last 2 years. Those are not all gone already, but the announcements have been made, the decisions have been taken, these jobs are gone. They are likely not going to come back, not easily. What is gone, we will have lost. And what can we do about it? What can we do in order to improve our competitiveness? So, my daily job is not running a business, my daily job is talking to policymakers. So my job here is to tell you a little bit about what happens on European level. We see the automotive package, we see the work the European Commission is doing on innovation, and we are also seeing the work on leveling the playing field on international trade and recalibrating how we trade with our partners. First, on the automotive package, you're very well aware of the proposals to revise the CO2 regulation with the famous 90%, and the equally famous question, does this mean the combustion engine ban has been removed? I would say, no, not yet. Yes, we are down from 100% to 90%, but those 10% need to be compensated with green steel and with fuels. And unfortunately, the rules, the regulations, the limitations, the criteria that are obliged on us, if we want to use this flexibility, are such that it is very difficult to use these flexibilities at all. That means we need to work further in our conversation with policymakers in order to explain what we need for this to make a difference in reality, in day-to-day business, so that it makes a difference for your investment decisions. That is not done yet, and it will be accompanying us for the rest of this year at least. And I made a little joke before. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but not really. It requires that people like me, or Jose and the team at Sernauto, or the other national associations, or all other businesses, all the businesses in this industry, repeat at least 3 times a day, every day between now and the end of the year or the end of that discussion, what the priorities are, what really makes a difference for industry, so that we will have a chance to see that in reality. It's not done yet. It needs engagement, it needs explaining, and it needs pushing. So please, if you share that point of view, then do support the associations, do support the engagement of policymakers by explaining what the priorities are, what the problems are, so that this sinks in and leads to decisions. I will not speak about the clean corporate fleets and the omnibus and the simplification in detail. These are other parts of the package that means to improve competitiveness. Unfortunately, what we see specifically in the omnibus, this is removal of inconsistencies, removal of repetitions, inconsistent definitions. The problem is, if we are confronted with regulation that fundamentally impacts our competitiveness in a negative sense, it will still impact our competitiveness in a negative sense, even without the inconsistencies. So there, I think, and this must be part of what we need to say 3 times a day until the end, until we found a solution. This is part of where we need to discuss whether the rules and regulations that we afford in Europe, whether those are really fit for purpose, whether they achieve what they mean to achieve. They are all well-intentioned, no doubt about that. Decarbonization, sustainability, labor standards, they all have their very well-justified reasons for being there, but we need to be critical where we don't achieve our targets. And yes, electrification is there, you saw that, but it's not going as quickly as we expected, and it is not going as quickly as it is doing in China. So where we are not as successful as we want to be, we need to be critical, we need to review the policies that we have, and also need to decide to do away a few of those if they don't help. And there, more work certainly is necessary. On innovation, a very important part, because that, I think, is the key for us to compete with other markets and to compete with China in particular. Here, the European, I like to be critical, but I also like to say where good things are done. Innovation, the European Union is funding pre-competitive research with significant budgets. We currently have a discussion on the future of those budgets. We are fighting as Clepa, together with the national associations and businesses, for continuation of significant funding. If we can get there, the biggest budget for R&I that we have ever seen in that context. But also this needs a lot of pressure, a lot of explanation why this is important, and it needs your engagement. And do please work via the associations, do please engage directly for you to participate in the projects, in the joint undertaking that we are currently preparing, so that you can benefit from it. Also in this context to be mentioned is the ICAVA Connected Autonomous Vehicles Alliance. This is a project for collaboration to develop the technology of the future of autonomous vehicles, the software, where we currently are struggling with and where we will need collaboration to make progress and to have a chance to compete with other markets, and certainly the formidable competition that China puts in front of us. There's much more detail. Unfortunately, I'm already close to being out of time. I don't want to leave you, though, without making a statement on the Industrial Accelerator Act, where I said we need to recalibrate how we looked at international trade and liberalization of trade in the past. I come from a world where we believe that international trade is fantastic and more international trade is even better. But I also have to accept that this is an easy position to take if you are a market leader, if you benefit, if it is about accessing new markets for exports. Now we also find ourselves being the market that is accessed. And there we need to make sure that the competition happens on a level playing field, that we have a minimum of fairness in there. The Industrial Accelerator Act, with the idea of incentivizing production in Europe, is a first step into that direction. And working together, we made great progress in defining what a European component and a European vehicle can look like. Also, this discussion is not yet at its end. It will need further work in order to get this to a point where it really helps the industry in Europe, where it incentivizes effectively production in Europe. But we also need to accept that if we get this right, this buys us time for improving our competitiveness, for reducing red tape, for reducing the energy cost, or for expanding the supply of affordable, sustainable, and reliable energy in Europe, and the many other factors that have an impact on this question. There's a lot to say about what we should do as businesses ourselves, and there's a lot of detail. I warned you ahead. If those slides are distributed, then do please have a look. What can we do to restore competitiveness as businesses? We looked into reports from consultants. It's a truism, it's very obvious. Digitalization will play a key role for the products that you put on the market and where you find differentiation with your competitors. It also means digitalizing from front to back your own businesses. And I would like to hear from you how far you feel you are and what we can do as the association to facilitate that, to organize the exchange of information on what can be done, what cannot be done, what works, what doesn't work, where do we need to work more, and where do we need the support from policymakers in order to make this a reality. Adapting to regionalization, also this, a very obvious one. Structural cost adaptation, that is a polite way of saying cutting cost. And I think everybody agrees that this needs to be done. However, we see in the survey that still more than half of respondents to our survey said that they are struggling to lower the break-even point in the last 3 years. Also here, more work is done. Again, work via the associations. Let us know where we can support in order to do our fair share of what we can do as industry to improve competitiveness, which gives the team at Sernauto, the team at Clepa, for myself, the good ammunition to go to policymakers and say, this is what we are doing, this is what we have achieved, this is where we need you to help us to get to the finish line. At the very end, I mentioned it before, the importance of community. We are organizing as Clepa the exchange of the National Association. There is very valuable work being done on important topics like sustainability, like environmental protection, climate policies, also the response to competition from outside. I can only encourage everyone to make sure that you participate, that you share your insights into these discussions so that we can make good use of it for, and here you see how this looks like when we engage with policymakers in the context of the strategic dialogues last year. That was a long series of family pictures. You see our president, you see other leaders of the industry there. It's a little bit small, but you also see this has a result because at the end of that process, we saw a first step of the European Commission recognizing that it needs to change at least some of the approach, parts of the approach that it took in the past when designing the regulations that characterize our daily business. In that sense, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for organizing, to the Sernauto team, for organizing this conference. Excellent opportunity to exchange and to network, of course, and I'm looking forward to doing so. Thank you.